Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Our current session focuses on rejecting the idea of speech communities. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand why the idea of speech communities is rejected by sociolinguists. Well, from purely theoretical point of view or for theoretical purposes, some linguists have hypothesized the existence of an ideal speech community. They have given certain characteristics and they believe that when a community has those characteristics, it can be called a speech community. This is actually what Chomsky proposed in 1965 when he talked about completely homogeneous speech communities. Because Chomsky's idea of, a linguistic community was the idea where, the focus was only on language that was isolated from the social factors. However, such a speech community is only a theoretical construct, and in the practical world, in the real world where we live, probably this is not a very acceptable idea. Mostly the speech communities that we have, whatever they are, because they exist in our real world, so, they have to fit in within the demands of the real world. Consequently, we need an alternative view of speech communities. So, if you trace the history of sociolinguistics, what you would find is that since the inception of the idea of speech communities, at different times, different sociolinguists and researchers and linguists, they have debated and argued about this idea, and they have tried to present other ideas that can replace this one. Using linguistic characteristics alone to determine what is or what is not a speech community has proved to be quite impossible and difficult to deal with, also through all the research that is carried out in sociolinguistics. Why it is so? Because people do not necessarily feel that they are directly in relationship with a particular language in a particular community where they are a part of. What I mean by that is they may live in a particular speech community, but they may feel themselves associated with another community. They may have some links with yet another community in terms of their profession, in terms of their ethnicity, etc. So what we can be sure of is that speakers do use linguistic characteristics to achieve kind of group identification and to create kind of group identities. But these group identities are not created merely on the basis of linguistic choices. There are other social factors that contribute. Occupation, ethnicity, gender, and many other social factors contribute towards that. For example, if you look at, Pakistan, and if you think of it as a huge speech community in terms of the use of language, Urdu, that is our national language, probably it would be a difficult idea because people sometimes may not feel related to or associated to this idea. They may have stronger ethnic identities, they may have stronger religious identities, they may have regional identities, that is the provincial identities, and thus they may feel associated with certain other languages that are used in different regions or in different provinces. Social categories actually of age, sex, ethnicity, social class, and also situation can be clearly marked on the basis of speech, and this kind of categorization is fundamental to social organization. Perhaps in this situation, then the idea of speech communities becomes less useful. Does this imply that we should abandon the idea of speech communities and we should go back and we should adopt the idea of group? The idea of group, that in itself is a very generalized idea, very loosely structured idea, and which has its own problems when it is taken up in sociolinguistics. As a solution, we have another term that is called communities of practice. Now comes the question, what is a community of practice? You need to understand this shift from speech community to community of practice. There are two keywords that you need to focus on, speech and practice. Speech again probably gives a connotation of focusing only on language, whereas when it comes to practice, of course, actions, both linguistic and non-linguistic, become a part of that. And actually, it was Eckert and McConnell Janet in 1998 who defined it as an aggregate of people who come together around mutual engagements in some common endeavor. If I simplify their definition, what it means is a group of people who gather together, who come together, who stay together for some common purpose, for some common effort, or some common endeavor. That can be called a community of practice. Now, communities of practices are made on what basis? What are their characteristics? Well, these can be ways of doing things, ways of talking, beliefs, values, power systems, power relationships. In short, all kind of practices that we find in any society. They emerge in the course of their joint activities when they cooperate, when they do some activity together. And as this set of beliefs and values and practices emerges, this makes them a community of practice. A community of practice is at the same time its members and what its members are doing to make them a community. Now, here are 2 points to understand. A community of practice is what? It is what the people are. So, a community of practice consists of people, A. And B, a community of practice is the practice itself, the activity itself, or the activities or practices themselves that these members involve in. For example, a group of workers in a factory, an extended family, an adolescent gang, a women's fitness group, a classroom, etc. Now think of each of these groups. Each of these groups is a community of practice. For certain actions, the workers work together. The extended family have their, family activities together. Women, for example, in a fitness group would do the gym or other exercises at their homes or other places together. So, each of these are communities of practices that are brought together through their activities. So, focus in these communities is on the practices, not individuals who are disconnected from that. There can be some individual activities as well, but there has to be a shared set of activities that makes it one community of practice. And there has to be a location, for example, in a particular network. Or they are a member of a particular group. For example, they join a group of social workers. For example, they are working as a group of businessmen, etc. It is such communities of practice that shape individuals, provide them with their identities, and often circumscribe what they can do. So, it gives a kind of shape to their whole lives. Groups and communities themselves are also very ever-changing. They are not static. They keep on changing. Their boundaries are porous. New members keep on coming in. Old members keep on going out. They keep on recreating themselves. They are fluid. Their shape and their size also keeps on changing. There are examples of today's middle-class youth, New Yorkers, immigrants, etc. And the sizes of these groups, as I hope you know, keep on changing. So, it is really important how do we choose to be a part of a particular speech community. These speech communities or groups or communities of practices actually refer to the same thing in sociolinguistics. It's only about choosing the term that suits more, the term that has less ambiguities.